Okay, this is Math Review 3-4, and we're going to talk about how to write an equation for dividing decimals. So we're going to have something divided by something equals something. The first thing I'm going to give you a red star is for this division symbol, and then the equal sign is going to be another star. We're going to look at our model, and we're going to see we have 1, 2, 3 tenths, and so that's going to be the first number that I write in my dividend at 3 in the tenths place, and then I have 5 hundredths, so it's going to be 5 in the hundredths place. So my dividend becomes 35 hundredths. That's the whole entire thing that's shaded. And it's going to be divided into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 groups. So my divisor is 7. So that's going to be another star. And then finally I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 inside each one of those groups. And so my answer is 5, but it's 5 little squares, which is hundredths. So the 5 must be in the hundredths place. And you can put a 0 in front for good mathematical practice. That gives you the last star. Well, actually, the final star comes from your key idea, which is an equation must have an equal sign. So that gives you a total of 6 stars for this problem. The next problem we have is multiplying decimals, and we're going to write an equation for this multiplication of the decimals. So you can see here in this model, it's a little different than the one we had before, because now we have colors that are crossing each other. The first thing that we're going to write is something multiplied by something equals something, because we're looking at an equation. So the multiplication gives you a star, and the equal sign gives you a star. I want you to look at the blue section. You have 5 rows, so those 5 rows represents 5 tenths. So that's going to be one of the factors that we have to multiply, and that's a star. The yellow section, you have 3 columns, so that's 3 columns represents 3 tenths. So that's the second factor, and that's a star. And now you're going to look at the green section. The green section turns out to be where the yellow and the blue meet, where they cross, making that green color. So you end up with 15 little squares in there, which represents 15 hundredths. So that's going to be my product, and that's my last star. And the key idea is an equation must have an equal sign, just like the other model problem that we just did. So again, this is 6 stars. Now let's talk about dividing decimals, and we're going to look at our dividend, which is the number that's being divided. So it's 6 and 91 hundredths, and the divisor is 8. Each one of those, if you put them in the right place, you get a star for those. The very first step is to move the decimal straight up to the quotient, so that's a star. And then we start dividing. Can 8 go into 6? And the answer is no. So you have a 0 in the quotient on top of the 6, and that's a star. You move on to the next number, which is a 9. So that's 69. And 8 goes into 69 8 times. That's going to give you a star, because 8 times 8 is 64. So when you subtract, you get a star for that if you subtract correctly. And you get a remainder of 5. Then we have a 1 to deal with. So the 1, we're going to bring it down into the problem. So it makes it a 51. So 8 goes into 51 6 times. That gives you a star in the quotient if you have the 6. Because 8 times 6 gives you 48. So when you subtract and you regroup correctly, you'll end up with a remainder of 3. And that gives you a star if you have that subtraction correct. Notice that you have a remainder of 3. So you have to add a 0, and that would give you a star if you did that. And then you're going to bring it down, making it a 30. So 8 goes into 30 exactly 3 times. So 3 times 8, or 3 gives you a star as well. 3 times 8 is 24, and that gives you a remainder of 6. But really, we don't care about the remainder. What we care about is that decimal up there in the quotient. Whenever you have, well, actually, let me go ahead and write down that remainder there. You have another remainder of 6. So you know you have to add another 0 and keep going. But for math review, for any other worksheet, for a test, if you have more than 3 numbers and you still have a remainder, then you need to make sure you round to the nearest hundredths place. Which means this 3 right here in the in the thousands place is going to tell me how to round. So I'm going to round, use that approximation symbol. That's going to give you a star if you have that. And we're going to say that the 6 is going to stay the same in the hundredths place, because the 3 in the thousands place is 4 or less. So we're going to let it rest. And my final answer is 86 hundredths. And then the key idea for that dividing decimals is the same as before. You got to move the decimals straight up. That's the last star. So you end up with 14 total stars on this question. Finally, multiplying decimals is going to be multiplying as if they were whole numbers. So 371 times 14. And if you set it up like that, you get a star. And then you start multiplying by the 4. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 7 is 28. There's the 8, carry the 2. And 4 times 3 is 12. plus the 2 on the top gives me 14. So if you have 1,484, you get a star for the first line of numbers. The next thing is that I'm going to do is I'm going to put a placeholder, and that's going to give me a star for the 0. Now I'm going to multiply by the 1. 1 times 1 is 1, 1 times 7 is 7, and 1 times 3 is 3. So if you ended up with 3,710 for the second line of numbers, you get a star for that. Then you got to put a plus sign and a line, and that gives you a star as well for setting up the addition. If you add correctly, 4 plus 0 is 4, 8 plus 1 is 9, so each one of these is giving you a star. 4 plus 7 is 11, there's the 1, and carry the 1, so the star for this one in the bottom, and then 1 plus 1 is 2, and 2 plus 3 is 5, so the last digit in my product is a 5. Now we can't forget about the decimals, so now we have to go back and put them where they go. So it's 37.1 and 1.4, so that means that for the first factor you have a bubble, for the second factor you have a bubble, and for the product you have a bubble. The first bubble should have a 1 in it because there's only one number behind the decimal, that's the 1. The second bubble is the same thing, you only have one digit, which is the 4 that's behind the decimal, and you combine the two bubbles to end up with the last bubble, which is 2. 1 plus 1 is 2. So you have to move, you have to get a star for each bubble if you have those correct, and then you do the little swoops, so you have to move the decimal twice from the right to the left, and that swoop gives you a star, and if you put the decimal between the 1 and the 9, that gives you a star as well. The key idea for this one is to use the bubble strategy to place the decimal point in the product, and that's the final star, so that gives you the total of 15 stars. If you do your reflection now, you're going to use these two sentence stems. I changed the way that I blank because blank, and I am proud of myself today because I blanked. And the total amount of stars for these problems, for this math review, if you add them all up together, you can see there are some compatible numbers. The 6 and the 14 gives you 20, and then 15, that's going to give you 35. So 35 plus 5 would give you 40, plus one more because it's at 6, it's not a 5, so it's going to be 41. And that's the end of math review for today. Make sure you do your reflections.